rating. The only big bill Congress will pass this year is going to be a tax bill, right? That'll probably be the only thing they actually get done legislatively. Everything else will be executive orders and other processes. In this tax bill, we've envisioned a future where we make sure we have to be a part of that conversation, because by and large, a lot of these things will happen and not necessarily give us the best advantage for economic growth or economic inclusion. So the panelists are great. We have a great panel. We've got Josh Jaffe over here from Congresswoman Sheila how do you say her name? Sherfilis McCormick. I never say that word. Sherfilis McCormick from Florida, and she is working on a bill called the All-American Tax Reform Act, which is a consumer-driven tax bill to allow, and I'll let Josh explain all the details, but it's intended to make sure that regular people get some of the tax benefits. So we're going to borrow $3 trillion, according to the budget estimates, for tax cuts. We make sure they don't all go to billionaires. And so some of that money, since we're paying for it, that we should actually get some of the benefits. Then we have here Alberto Torrejano. He's a fiduciary for ESOPs, which are employee
stock ownership.
Thank you. So ownership, and that is those are entities. That's a policy that allows for owners of companies to sell to their employees as they transition out. And so we think in this day and age, a way for regular people to have a chance to at corporate ownership is one of these processes. And so he's going to talk about that and what proposals they have to actually make it more accessible. Then we have Stephanie Fauntleroy. No L. It's pronounced Fauntleroy. She is a CPA extraordinaire. She actually helped us analyze the All-American Tax Act to come up with some case studies on how it would benefit consumers. And we're also going to talk about some of the President Trump actually had his own tax bill similar to this, where he's going to eliminate taxes for people making under $150,000 a year. So she's going to help us delve into that a little bit. And then we have Michael Harlow from CohnReznick, who's also a CPA and tax expert extraordinaire, to talk about these issues as well and try to help us run through what the future should look like, so that we actually have a seat at the table or have something to say when the tax bill conversation comes up. So with that, I will start with Stephanie and then work to Michael and then work our way back down. So.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here, you guys. Okay, sorry about that. I'll speak into the mic. Is this thing? Okay, so I'm happy to be here. I kind of was asked to be on the panel because I'm in the weeds working with taxpayers every day, especially now. And I kind of get to see what our issues are on the ground. So I was asked to do a bit of a case study, and I'll talk to you guys a little bit about what that looks like when Kevin, kind of delves in. But I also want to make a quick correction. I am not a CPA.
Oh, sorry. I give you promotion.
No, it's okay. I appreciate that. I don't want to steal anyone else's credentials. I am an EA, though, because my focus is on tax law and tax code. So that's just a quick correction about me. But yeah, again, I'm happy to be here and add to the conversation, and we can talk a bit about the case studies that we've done.
Hi, I'm Michael Harlow. I'm the office managing partner for the DC practice for CohnReznick. So we're a top 20 national accounting firm. So I can give you a perspective about the clients we deal with, particularly with the new market tax credits, the Opportunity Zone funds, and the LIHTC, the low income housing tax credit programs, and how that works.
Oh, we couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. All again? Hey, Michael Harlow, I'll try again. Office managing partner for the DC Metro tax practice for CohnReznick, a top 20 accounting firm here in the U.S. I'm going to talk specifically about the new market tax credits, the Opportunity Zone funds, and the LIHTC programs. And I'm not even going to touch the details. I'm not a subject matter expert in any one of those areas. One of the things I do think I'm going to talk about, though, is how specialized the tax code has gotten and how that's become a barrier to entry, as well as I appreciate the designation between the EA, which would be a tax professional, and the CPA, certified public accountant, and the barriers to entry that we're seeing for students in trying to get the CPA and why that's limiting minority as well as low-income applicants into the field.
Awesome. Albie?
Yeah, I'm Albie Terrahana. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to talk about one of the few things that both Democrats and Republicans can actually agree on, which is employee ownership. You know, it's one of the few, recent legislation that was passed was actually co-sponsored by guys like Senator Bernie Sanders and former Senator Secretary Marco Rubio. Imagine those two people co-sponsoring something that we can agree on. Look, worker ownership is something that produces better outcomes for communities of color. 40% higher wages for African Americans, 30% higher wages for people of color, 40% higher wages for single parents, and 2 times average wealth or savings created for households. So it's generally a good thing. There's things we, as those who influence policy, can coach our stakeholder representatives to do better for us, to ensure that those benefits are more broadly distributed and help lift people from the middle up. So.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Josh Jaffe with Congresswoman Sheila Shurfless McCormick. Speaking here on her behalf. She wanted to be here, but it's a district work week, and so whenever she can get back to the district, she chooses to just to go talk with her constituents and be face-to-face. So I'm here invited on behalf of Kevin to discuss kind of the tax policy landscape, what's going on the ground in Congress. Like Kevin said, it's going to be a very, very busy year. Democrats were in the minority, so we're not going to have that much input into this tax bill, but we can build kind of grassroots resistance and get people to advocate for policies that are actually going to close the racial wealth gap and reduce economic inequality. And that's something my boss has been very passionate about, and so she's been working very hard on the All Americans Tax Relief Act, and we're looking forward to introducing it in the coming weeks, getting co-sponsors, and really reframing the narrative when it comes to tax policy and what is going on in Congress. I think this new Republican Party is very different in terms of how it approaches economic issues. It's a lot more populist, and so we see an opportunity to kind of incorporate some of the more working class proposals that Democrats have long championed and get them into the bill, hopefully. So, thank you.
Thank you. So why don't we start with you, Josh, and talk about some of the components of the tax bill. I think it may have been handed out or it's on our website, but explain to the folks what you're trying to do with the bill.
Yeah, so this bill was a lot of work. I also, I forget your name, but you said you're not a subject matter expert. I'm not a subject matter expert either in tax policy. So it took a lot of work and a lot of research to make this bill work. But it has about 10 or so provisions. The first, and I think the bulk of it, which was the hardest to craft, was a giant expansion of the earned income tax credit for all different family types. So whether that's you're a single taxpayer with 1 child or a married couple with 3 children, giving them a boost through increasing the maximum credit amount, but also increasing the phase-in rate so you're able to access that credit faster, and then also decreasing the phase-out rate so that people who are a little bit higher up on the income ladder but would otherwise not qualify for the EITC can get access. Because we know prices obviously right now are really high. One of the biggest things we did, though, was increase the earned income tax credit for single taxpayers and really increase that phase-in rate, because the data shows that this tax credit is one of the biggest drivers of productivity and encouraging people to participate in the workforce. And so this is, we saw this as a really big opportunity to not only help extend another lifeline to these people, but also encourage them to enter the workforce. That was probably the most difficult portion of the bill to craft. We also expanded the child tax credit to $2,000 and made it fully refundable. And then we created a series of different tax deductions that working families would really, rely on. So things like medical expenses, the number one cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States, making them fully deductible. Making rent deductible for certain individuals below a certain income threshold. Making daycare expenses deductible. I'm sure you all know daycare is really expensive. A lot of people don't have access to it. working on closing the achievement gap, which we saw during the pandemic with learning loss, by making tutoring expenses deductible, so that, you know, for people enrolled in Title I schools, typically lower income, you know, students of color, it's really going to help benefit them and close the achievement gap for them. And then also making credit card debt interest payments deductible. And these are all above the line deductions. We also have commuting costs as well included in the bill. So you don't have to itemize. So that was the key, is like if you take the standard deduction, you can take these deductions instead of having to itemize, which is obviously very difficult to do.
So Stephanie, you had a chance to review some of these ideas. What'd you find out? What'd you learn?
So to just piggyback off of what Josh was, you know, talking about in the reform bill, I went and did a case study just based on real life scenarios, right? And what that would look like if we implemented the reform and plugged in the numbers, right? So just to kind of jump to the end, if we were to take a family, now, this is using a family with a gross income of $266,000. Now, we know this is way higher than the median income, but part of the conversation is increasing who gets to get help and assistance, right? Because we know that the median income, well, maybe you don't know, but it is around $60,000 a household in all of America. That's the median income. However, it does not factor in metropolitan areas, areas like this one, where the incomes are much higher, almost double. And in fact, you're seeing where a lot of families that live in this area are actually paying the tax of someone else's income, like literally are paying $50,000 or more in tax, which is somebody else's whole income. But the tax code is made to either help the very, very wealthy or the very, very destitute, right? So that's the problem, I think, bridging the gap. And I think that what this reform bill is looking to do is to, you know, close it a little bit and bring kind of everybody in. So using the higher end of $266,000 and using the different things like the tutoring and increasing the earned income tax credit, and also, I'm sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear me, but also incorporating the like I said, the tutoring costs, professional development, most of the things that you heard Josh mention, you're looking at a savings of close to $12,000 in a household of $266,000 in that household. And it's significant. I mean, right now, I see where my clients are paying $20,000 just for childcare, right? So how could that type of savings be impactful in any household across America? So I think we just need to kind of bring it in. If we're looking at $150,000 for a family, you're talking about still $7,000 in savings, right? So as the number goes down, we still get that savings, and it's so critical. So we did the case studies, and I believe Kevin put them inside of our information handouts. Yeah, so you guys could take a closer look at it. And just one of the things that I just want to mention, and I'm just going to jump on my soapbox a little bit if I can borrow from you. Education, right? So I think these forums are so important, and I'm so honored to even be on it and be able to speak to you guys about this, because this is an issue that affects every single person in this room, and we need to figure out the proper way to disseminate it to everyone, because statistics say 93% of Americans make under $150,000 in income. And if the tax law that Trump is trying to do happens, that's going to cover the entire, that whole 93%. But then what happens to everyone else, right? That the other, like maybe 7 or 8%, right? That's under $1 million, but still over 250, right? So we just need to widen the net a bit so we can cover all of these folks. And I think this Reform Act is the is a good start in that direction, but we really need to educate our people around what that looks like and how to push for it.
Okay. So, Albie, I'm gonna switch topics. You know, if we're having a populist conversation about taxes, right?
Yeah.
ESOPs are about as populist as you can get. That's why Bernie Sanders supports the conversation. How far are we in the legislation, and what else can we do? Like, if Josh's boss were willing to do something to make employee ownership or workers more empowered at work for the future, what would that look like?
Well, I think there's kind of three things. One is there's a scope of a very meaningful opportunity. I mean, everybody, if we back up a step, if we back up one large step, you've got economic history has always been defined by whether you call it the balancing act or the struggle versus those who provide capital and those who provide labor. But in this country, we historically have paid providers of labor for their time, right? I mean, it's a massive interest conflict. If I'm a business owner, do I want people to take more time to do their work? And so we have an opportunity, one, to align incentives. The other part of the opportunity is just the sheer number of baby boomers who are retiring. There are almost, and I have it written on my phone, so I apologize, there's 3 million businesses today representing 32 million working Americans held by people over the age of 55. That represents $6.5 trillion with a T of revenue. So that's a huge opportunity. People refer to that as the silver tsunami. So how do we ensure that those businesses have an exit strategy that can help uplift workers? I don't believe that there is enough private equity capital to soak up that, these businesses as they begin to retire. And so what can policyholders do? One, they did pass Secure Act 2.0 in 22-23 timeframe, which was a very important asking the Department of Labor to say, hey, Department of Labor, you've had a chilling effect on the creation of employee ownership. Why? Because when we established ESOPs, you said, this is how an ESOP should be formed, and you never created regulations and rules to say how that's supposed to be done. Congress asked the Department of Labor when ESOPs were formed in 1974, again in 1988, and they've done it again. We need clarity. We need a better understanding so that those who are in the business of creating employee stock ownership plans are essentially not sued by our regulatory stakeholders. I think that's number one. Number two is looking for creative opportunities to transition the wealth that's built up in employee-owned businesses to within communities of color. I mean, I was talking earlier to someone who's a business owner who does government contracting. If you're a person of color and you're about to sell your business because you're getting it because you deserve to do so, who do you sell it to? Can you find someone else of color to sell your business to and still maintain access to small business set-asides and things of that nature? So one of the legislation that the ESOP Association has been promoting has been transition for employee-owned businesses, is allowing folks who benefit from minority-owned and small business set-asides to maintain that status through a business ownership transition as long as that transition takes place to their workforce. Those things are good. Those things will, like I said, create wealth from the middle out. So those are just a couple of things I can think of off the top of my head, Kevin.
So, Michael, totally different question to you. Yesterday, or I guess last weekend, we were on the phone, we were talking about the fact that the CDFI fund got eliminated. And what do you as an accountant in general, but as a policy person, if what Albie's trying to do and what the Congresswoman is trying to do, where do we go from here? If we're going to get rid of the CDFI fund for your business interests, your investor interests, how do they figure out what to do with their money, or what structure we put in place to help them put money back into the communities?
Yeah, I Googled the news on my way over here to see if anything else had changed in the past couple hours, and I'm sure that something I'm about to say is probably outdated. That's just how quickly we're moving. So let me back up a little bit and just paint a picture of what we do. We're a large accounting firm. We generally work with larger clients, and the reason for that is that the tax policy in this country has become so specialized that there's not really such a thing as a tax generalist anymore. So when I went into my office to talk to our Opportunity Zone folks, our new market tax credit people, and our LIHTC people, those were three different groups of experts within the firm. They all had overlap. They all were much more familiar with the individual programs than I am. My background is in hospitality and real estate taxation. But this specialization in the tax code has become a real barrier to entry and created obstacles. So yes, the CDFIs relate specifically to the new market tax credit program. I don't exactly know so the administration theoretically killed CDFIs, but I'm not sure how that's going to play out in practice. These projects still exist across the country. They have to be funded somehow. That's a congressional issue, I don't think a presidential issue. But how they're actually going to be administered on a go-forward basis and how that's going to be restructured, we don't know yet. What we do know is that all of these programs have some commonalities, and that's that you have to have investors that want to have capital and have tax liabilities, because they're all tax incentive programs. You invest in an Opportunity Zone, you invest in a CDFI or a low-income housing tax credit program. In return, you get tax credits back that you can use to reduce your corporate taxation. So if you don't have a tax liability to begin with, there's no tax incentive to invest in any of these programs. So by definition, finding investors that have large tax bills and have capital to spend, by definition, those are larger institutional operators. So the programs have all been successful to some extent or the other in driving investment into low-income census tracts or other disadvantaged communities, but they're doing it because of large institutional investors that are placing monies through CDFIs or through Opportunity Zone funds to invest in those areas. Stepping back to try to think about how to propose solutions in the current environment is really challenging when things are changing on a day-to-day basis, but I can tell you about some of the things that create challenges for us on a daily basis. One of them is the barrier to entry into the accounting field. For any of you that have friends, families, nieces, nephews trying to decide what to do with the rest of their lives, tell them to become an accountant. I do not know anybody in the accounting industry who is not very busy all the time. There are simply not enough of us. But because there are not enough of us, that creates a premium on our labor cost as a firm, and it creates a premium for the prices that we have to charge through to clients, all because of that scarcity. Part of that goes back to generational policy. When I went to North Carolina State University 25 years ago, that was about the time many states were rolling out what they call the 150 credit hour requirement, which means that you had to have 150 credit hours of college degrees, of college credits to sit for the CPA exam. So most states and many universities set up 5-year programs like North Carolina State did. So we had a 5th-year master's program that then qualified for you to sit for the CPA exam. 25 years ago, I think I spent about $7,000 on my master's program, and I still graduated with student debt. Currently, equivalent program to like University of Maryland, great program. We recruit a lot of students from that program. That's a $30,000+ a year program. So accounting entry-level salaries have increased pretty significantly over the past 5 or 6 years. But for the 20 years before that, even though the cost of these programs had tripled, the cost of the entry-level salary did not. So what we actually saw over the past generation was a decrease of minority participation in the accounting profession, not an increase. Virginia, I want to say Michigan, I'll have to double check me on that one, and Maryland are all moving forward with plans to reduce the 150 credit hours and replace that with an apprenticeship model, which we're hoping will bring more people back in the industry. It may not be great for my business, like scarcity, to be honest, is very good for us, but it's not good for the larger community, and it's actually absolutely a barrier to entry.
So, Albie, as we talk about this, we're talking about opportunity zones, talking about all these tax policies. Is there ways for us to increase funding for ESOPs? Like, should we be looking at this tax bill as a way to find, like the qualified thrift lenders test, the old, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, it's an old, like a basket of products that you have to have in your portfolio as one of these institutions to be able to get the tax deductible.
And, so when an employee-owned business is created, we have a trust of employees that essentially buys the stock from the owner. That trust doesn't show up with a bag of money to buy that business. Typically, employee-owned business transitions are facilitated by funding either from banks or from sellers or from third-party investors. And one of the things I do is help business owners raise money for that transition because, people who have built a business deserve to get some reward out. The chilling effect of regulation by subpoena has crowded out investors. The number of sophisticated investors that I've told you is, I will never invest in a business that has an employee stock ownership plan because, boy, it's too complicated and these guys get sued a lot. And that wasn't what Congress intended when it established the Employment Retirement Security Act of 1974. So, I think it goes back to fundamentals of clarity, elimination of risk, and elimination predominantly of what I would call tail risk. The assumption that I'm going to buy something and get sued for it.
Thanks. Josh, I don't know if you've heard, but so President Trump has said he wants to eliminate taxes for people who make under $150,000. He's also talked about not taxing tips and letting people. Oh, I'm sorry. President Trump said he wanted to let people who make under $150,000 a year not pay taxes, income taxes. He also wanted to let people deduct their car payments, et cetera. Have you guys examined how that compares to your conversation? Plus, do you think it helps legitimize the conversation you're trying to have anyways? Because if you and the president are both having a similar conversation, then it's probably valid or viable anyway.
Yeah, well, I definitely think, the new Republican Party, the economic populism it's now espousing as evidenced by, the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. He just floated the idea of, cutting federal income taxes for everyone making under $150,000 a year. I think that really does give legitimacy to, the All Americans Tax Relief Act because, we're pretty much doing the same thing, just in different ways, right? We're, finally targeting things that most working and middle-class Americans spend the most on, whether that's, medical bills, whether that's their commute to work, their rent. So I think that there's a lot of different conversations about how we can achieve economic prosperity for all. Now, I think ours takes a much more tailored approach. We also offset it with a slight raise in the capital gains tax for the highest capital gains earners. So it's not a full, it's not going to totally erode the tax base, which the, $150,000 may propose, that proposal would probably do, or would need to be coupled with something else, which I expect would be something very regressive, like a national sales tax, which will disproportionately affect people who are low income and spend the most of their money on, consumable goods right then and there. So yeah, we'll see, as these conversations continue to arise, whether, these provisions can somehow sneak their way into a tax bill. I think currently, the Tax Writing Committee has a lot on its plate already. They were only given about $4.5 trillion in breathing room to extend the tax cuts from 2017, and that doesn't even factor in all these other types of things. We're talking about no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, eliminating the income tax for those under $150,000. So, they're going to have to really, increase the deficit and go even bolder if that is what they want to achieve. And it's going to be really difficult for them to do that, given that they've only got about $4.5 trillion to work with.
So I'm going to, Stephanie, tie that back to your case studies for a second. If we take the Trump 150 number, correct me if I'm wrong, under the All-American, you get to say, just take rent, for example. If your rent goes from 1,000 to 1,500, you get to deduct that from your taxes. But if you do the 150, that's a stagnant number, right? So whatever you're saving, say you're paying 15,000 a year in taxes, if your rent goes up by 4,000, then you're not really getting 15,000 because you can't deduct it, versus All-American, you get to deduct what you actually spend. What's preferable?
I personally think it's preferable to let everybody, that especially under 150,000, right? Which is what the bill covers. But even up to, again, the 250,000 mark, I think that we should let everybody pretty much deduct everything. And that we should be taxing the companies and the people that aren't paying taxes. So I really think that there's enough here for, because quite frankly, even if they shift from federal taxes, they're going to shift to state tax, right? So we're going to still end up having to pay some sort of tax, state tax, and to piggyback on what Josh was saying, then we're going to increase sales tax. So we're going to still have taxes, right, in that implication. But I think that, overall, if the bill was just expanded a bit in terms of increasing the income and then just removing those barriers, like really just, we don't need to pay tax on anything. I know it sounds crazy, right? But what we do pay into across the country, particularly people under 150,000, is just not a lot. It's not as impactful on our bottom line in this country as people believe it to be, right? We need money from other sources to pay into the things that the country needs to run. So I just think that we can have the liberty to really remove and really look at the actual things that the taxpayers are paying, which is very high property taxes, but you can only deduct up to $10,000 of it on your tax return now. No limits on your medical expenses, because they are incredibly high. And just to give you a real life scenario, I had a client just a couple of days ago that paid $67,000 on his teeth in 1 year. So it's completely unaffordable, right? But the caps and the thresholds for us to be able to take medical expenses are also extremely high, and they are unreasonable in the current tax code. So if we remove those ceilings, I think that we'll definitely be able to see an advantage based on what the reform is suggesting.
Mike, one last question, then I'll throw it out to the audience. Obviously, the education in America is very expensive. You talk about bringing people into the, do you think that going with the model, the apprenticeship model, is viable? I mean, is that a good enough solution to try to offset that?
This might be one of those areas where there could be some across the aisle collaboration. If the Republican orthodoxy is cut regulation, deregulate, maybe this is one of those areas where you could go, not just the CPA profession, but other professions that require licensure. Like, do you really need a license for everything? And do you have to go to school? What we thought of, and this is going to be controversial, a traditional 4-year education for everything as opposed to an apprenticeship model. Personally, I think there's significant benefit in community colleges and apprenticeship programs and trade schools. My own kids, we talk about having a plumber come to the house and do some work, and I'm like, that guy is, you want that job in the future. He's going to, got a trade education, he's going to own his own business one day, and he's going to make money than just about anybody else in our neighborhood. So I do think there's huge opportunity for apprenticeship programs. The challenge from an employer is finding the candidates in the right places. So we as an employer are looking at community colleges, we're looking at 2-year programs, or they're enrolling their students into 4-year programs. And then what we have been limited to in the past is finding a way to get them that 5th year, that additional 30 credit hours for the 150. If I could instead onboard them at the 20 credit hours, and then I'm responsible for the apprenticeship program as an employer, and then after 2 years of the apprenticeship, they can then sit for the CPA exam, that would be an absolute net positive for me as an employer and for the student from a cost standpoint. And that's coming from somebody that did a 5-year program.
And I just want to piggyback on that, Michael. I think that it is important to understand the difference between a CPA and an EA, but they're both, EAs are, mostly focused on tax code and the law, right, and tax law, versus accounting, which is, all numbers, right, all numbers, all that. But whatever the case may be, there is a barrier into education there, because even just for me to get my EA ran me about, with the coursework and the licensure, a little less than maybe $8,000 or so, just to get that piece, and that wasn't even traditional schooling. But those barriers keep people like me from getting in there, and if we could get in there, we could actually reach our people more. This is the Minority Policy Summit. We're trying to reach the minorities, whatever that looks like in America. So we really just, I think, need to really focus on educating and what that looks like in terms of bringing more trainers in, people that can teach more people how to teach more people, so, and it is expensive. So, and I think an apprenticeship model is a really great idea. And just to give you some numbers, literally, there's less than 100 Black women that are EAs in America.
Less than 100?
EAs.
Less than 100, yeah.
There are somewhere around that number.
Wow.
Yeah, whenever I'm in these rooms in associations, because I'm a member of the National Association of Enrolled Agents and the National Society of Tax Professionals, I can count on one hand the number of people that look like me. But every there's all of you guys, there's taxpayers, everybody, there's a lot of people that look like me that need the guidance and the education around what we're talking about.
Well, yes.
I know I'm not on this panel.
No, go ahead.
But I wanted to just jump in there. What Michael said is absolutely awesome. And last year, the Department of Labor, there was an executive order. Anyway, Trump just rescinded that executive order yesterday. We rescinded creating registered apprenticeship programs.
You just eliminated it?
He just rescinded it yesterday. But it's an excellent way to get people involved in the profession. We have the first ever national appraisal apprenticeship program in the country, certified through the U.S. Department of Labor. And so, to your point, it gets folks directly to where they can start learning and earning and make a difference. So I think that's something legislative that we definitely need to fight to get back. And this just happened yesterday, and it was rescinded.
I figured you were going to say something about apprenticeships. I was waiting. That was good.
I wasn't thinking about it.
And I'll add to that, because the construction industry is hurting in labor force, and one of the best way to get people, especially our young cats, into the construction industry is through the trades, right? I spoke at several high school panels talking about why apprenticeship is equally important, because you can go into apprenticeship in almost every single industry now, not just, professional or anything, right? So going beyond just the construction, you can go into the health field, you can go into so many. So there's rescission, is that the word? Of the apprenticeship program is just, no more.
Any other questions? We run out. I've got about a couple more minutes. Anyone have questions about the tax stuff? No? Cool. Well, thank you guys. We learned a lot.
Thank you.